Hello everyone, Emily here. Thanks for joining me today. I'm going to start off by sharing a little bit about who I am and what I do. I'm a landscape and seascape photographer and a complete ocean addict. And I'm based by the beach in Bournemouth in Dorset, and I'm so incredibly lucky to have so much beauty right on my doorstep. I'm going to take you through my journey into landscape photography, right from the beginning to where I am today, what I love about it, what inspires me, the kit that I use, and any techniques too. And there'll be time for questions at the end. So taking it right back to the start, when I moved to the beautiful seaside town of Bournemouth around the age of 4 years old, and right from that very young age, I had a little film camera that I absolutely loved, and I remember taking photos of everything. I was so captivated by seizing moments through a lens. I still have some of those images to this day, mostly blurry photographs of my family. But that love of photography started right back there, sending off my roll of film, waiting to see what came back. And I also had a great love of nature and the beach, and I spent many days at the beach as a child. I have such fond memories of jumping the waves with my mum, my gran, and my whole family, in fact. So fast forward to around about 8 years ago, and my wife bought me my first DSLR for my birthday. And whilst it took me a while to get to grips with, once I understood what I wanted to get out of the camera and the images that I wanted to achieve, I just haven't put a camera down since. And I remember setting my alarm for that very first sunrise and heading out with all my gear packed and my flask of coffee and watching in awe as the colours of sunrise unfolded right in front of me and firing off some shots as it happened. And that was it. That was all I needed to be hooked on capturing these scenes at these magical hours of dawn when most people were tucked up in bed. It almost felt like a special moment just unfolding from my eyes only. And photography really helps me connect with my surroundings and be completely immersed and become part of it. And it's such a huge part of my life now. I honestly can't remember life without photography. So around about 2 years ago, after having enough of carrying around a heavy kit bag, I made a decision to move to mirrorless. It was actually after a trip to India where I had my bag on my back every day and ended up just being so tired. I was looking for something smaller, lighter, easier for travel and the long hikes that I find myself on. And I made the move to Fujifilm and I purchased the X-T3 and various lenses. And it was a great decision for me. The whole system's just so intuitive, and I'm not that technically minded, so most of what I shoot and what I use is more based on a feeling rather than an overly technical review. So yeah, I just love the feel of it, but more about kit and techniques in a little bit. So about me, I had an opportunity to go part-time in my day job a couple of years back. I was starting to sell more prints, and I've been approached several times to do talks and workshops out in the field. And I'd always turned this down previously, as I felt there were many more photographers out there much better than me. I guess I had a fear that I just wasn't good enough, and in turn thought that I might fail. It then came to a turning point where I started regretting turning things down. What could I be missing out on? And I decided to say yes to the opportunities that arose. And over the years, I'd picked up quite a lot of experience and knowledge around my areas of photography, specifically landscapes and seascapes. And without even realizing it, I'd created my own style. Initially, people kept telling me my style was recognizable, and at first I really didn't know what this meant, and it took me a while to see it for myself. My dream is to work in photography full time, but now the balance works quite well for me. And anyway, the important bit about this is to have faith in yourself, and if you have a passion for something, it really will shine through. I always tell people I'd never claim to know everything, but I know what works for me, and I'm always happy to share that. And if people want to hear what I have to say and work with me, then I'm massively honoured. And there's no right or wrong in photography, just with any art. It's all about personal preference. And that's one of the reasons that I love it so much. And you can experiment in so many ways, and there's always something to learn. It's all about keeping inspired and just keep learning. And I shoot weddings and commercial jobs too. And I just love photography, and I love using it to connect with the world around me, and be that nature or people. So over the years, my shooting style and my subject matter has developed massively in on my love of the sea. I'm out in the sea regularly, having dips most days, and so it makes sense that my inspiration for photography also comes from this. And the sea is such a bigger connection to nature and being part of something so huge. And as I mentioned, I always loved being out in the sea as a child. And I remember being out there no matter the weather. And these feelings have remained with me to this day. And actually, since the start of the pandemic, myself and my wife have been dipping almost every day. And I feel really proud of managing this all year round, which we know isn't that great in the cold water of the UK. So I shoot seascapes from both the shoreline and out in the deep too. And to be out in the ocean as the sun comes up and to see in the new day is completely out of this world. And I really love being able to capture and document those moments in my images. Whether that be the silky smooth ripples on the water or the colours of sunrise. And I also enjoy shooting the surfers out in the water too. I enjoy chasing interesting weather conditions. So whether that be fog or snow or storms or just the insane colours of sunrise, they all entice me out to see locations in a different way. Great light or interesting conditions can really turn a good image into an exceptional one. And what I feel makes a great image is more around the feeling that that image conveys. If I can make the viewer feel like they were there in that scene and I can show my story, my experience, then I've achieved my goal. For me, it's really going beyond the technical details and getting lost in the moment and following what I see in front of me. And even travel seems like a distant memory for most of us at the moment, but once photography took hold of my life, it really changed the way that I viewed travel. I wanted to record how a place or a culture showed itself to me. And for example, the time I spent traveling India, it opened up a whole new world of photography, capturing the people and the daily activities which I found myself immersed in through my photography. Any trips away found me seeking out different places, and even better, trying to do some research and finding spots completely off the beaten track. Whether it's in the UK or further afield, travel for me is all about those new experiences and immersing myself in them through my lens. And in previous years, I'd always be planning the next big adventure, but 2020 was obviously very different. And something that's been a huge thing for me is shooting local and keeping inspired and trying to keep that creativity flowing. I'm just so lucky with where I live on the south coast and just a few minutes cycle from the beach. And so that year not only got me out on my bike more and brought back my love of getting in the sea, but photographically it had me revisiting the scenes that I've shot so many times before and just seeing them with new eyes. A fresh way of seeking something out and seeking it out in a different way will always keep it interesting. And every day is different. You'll be presented with new conditions, new light. The seasons change and transform the scenes that you see in front of you every day. And being by the sea, the changing tide adds a whole other variable twist on it too. Plus, you'll always be looking for better or more interesting conditions, and your skills will develop as a photographer. I think we as humans, we're forever changing and adapting, and exactly the same can be said for photography too. And so moving on to the kit that I use, as I mentioned, I shoot with Fujifilm, I have an X-T3, and such a varying range of lenses. And I try and have most of them with me as much as I can because you never know what's going to be presented to you, and I don't want to miss any shots. So in my kit bag, most of the time, I've got the 14mm prime, 18 to 55, 35, 60mm macro, 55 to 200, so quite a good range. And I've also been using the 10-24, which is now weather sealed, and that's hugely important for me because being out in any conditions, it often means my gear is getting wet from the rain. And plus being at the water's edge just means a lot of sea spray is continually catching me out. And of course, at the shoreline, I'm also shooting on a tripod. And it's always a guarantee that I leave with wet feet, which is always part of the fun. So keeping that in mind, it's always useful to have wellies, or if it's warm enough, I'll just take my shoes off and just stand in the shallow water. Also, I have a mixture of filters on hand too, so that's just useful for balancing the sky and the land, and also to be able to extend the shutter time too. And I also have a waterproof housing for taking my gear out in the ocean now. This is really something that's quite exciting for me because after using a fairly budget housing for quite some time and always being too scared to actually put the camera below the surface, I actually took the plunge recently and I purchased a Sea Frogs housing for my X-T3. So now I just can't wait for some warmer weather and to be able to spend much longer out in the water. I'm also looking to develop this area of photography much more. As photographers, it's always good to have personal projects and personal goals on the go. There's always something to learn, and I feel that's what keeps it all so interesting too. So as for any techniques or tips that I can offer, when shooting from the shoreline, like I say, I'm usually on a tripod. This means the camera's held firmly in position. It allows you to play with shutter speeds. But before even shooting though, I like to watch the sea. I'm always observing how it's behaving, and you don't want to be caught out by any rogue waves. Also, having checked the tide times, which is really important too. Especially you could be at a location where the tide could cut you off or just make it dangerous. So it's always worth checking those kind of things. But then you want to consider how you want to represent that scene. Do you want a quicker exposure to freeze the power of some big waves? Or do you want to create a little movement and trails of the water? Or do you want to create something minimal and calming, just smooth it all out with a nice long exposure? And there's no right or wrong for me. It's whatever I feel best for that scene in front of me in that moment. And I really enjoy playing with wave trails. And that means hitting the shutter just as the wave's coming in or crashing out. And it can create a really nice foreground to your image. And getting the trails coming right out of the bottom of the frame. And I find it so mesmerizing that I can just get lost in the moment and come home with hundreds of images. But no shot will ever be identical. Each wave is different, creating different patterns and different trails. And as for the gear and techniques that I generally use for this, I prefer the 10-24 or the 14mm to be my go-to lenses. And the reason for this is the wider the better, because I can just get much more foreground in, just as much as possible. And obviously, it all depends on the light, but I'd be looking for something between a second or two, just really depending on how quickly those waves are crashing in and what you want to create out of the image. And it's also fun playing around with longer exposures and putting on a filter to really hold back the light and go for 30 seconds or a minute or even more, making the water super smooth and causing the main subject matter to be really sharp and stand out in the misty water. I thoroughly enjoy the creativity that all of this type of photography offers. And that being said, as I mentioned, I spent a lot of 2020 just cycling around my local area. And I had quite limited gear in my bag, even on occasion just having the XT3 and a 35mm lens attached, and just stopping for handheld shots along the way. It's really been a time that's reminded me to always be prepared and have my camera on me just in case, as I never want to miss that special moment. And as for shooting right out in the water, I sometimes vary between my 60mm and my 55-200 lenses within the waterproof housing. I enjoy focusing out on the ripples in the sea or the movement of the waves. And as I'm out there at sunrise, the light is low and being handheld is obviously very different to being on a tripod, and I need the camera to be as quick as possible. So I'll be looking to keep the lens wide open and keep the shutter speed around 250th of a second. And shooting this way will need to be altered as the light changes. So I generally just look to alter the ISO as I go. But it does mean being so much more aware of what the light is doing and reacting to it so much quicker than when you're static on a tripod. So in a moment, I'd like to show you some images, and all of these photographs have something special behind them. Whether it's a story, a magical memory of a sunrise, a moment spent alone or with someone special, or sometimes it's just a composition that's really called out to me. And I've realised that when I talk about my images and photography in general, I talk way more about how the images make me feel, why I took it, or the story behind it, rather than the technical aspects of the kit or the settings. For me, it's about fully being in that moment, and then in turn being able to share that moment too. So that leads me on nicely now to share some images with you before the Q&A. So this particular shot, this was taken just down at the end of my road. I'm lucky enough to have a small riverbank. This particular morning, I'd cycled down there, camera in hand with my 35mm, just as I mentioned, as I'd shot quite a lot like this during the pandemic. And just literally cycling past, seeing this scene unfolding. There's luckily no winds, there's no movement on the water. Just grabbed a handheld shot and off I went again, cycling along the river. And that light and that moment is just so special that, it's not going to be repeated. Every single morning is totally different. And so this next shot, for example, same area of the riverbank, completely different conditions, a very misty morning. And something that was really nice, just being able to chill out on the riverbank, no wind, no movement in the water, and just capturing some of these boats. It was a really special morning. So also, as I mentioned, I'd enjoy being out in the water, taking out my waterproof housing, and just resting it on the top of the water and being able to shoot across and capturing some of these ripples. And as you can see, a very shallow depth of field, and getting that sunrise coming up over the horizon. So generally, I'll just focus in on one area of the ripples, just fire off a few shots. Plenty of movement, so you might take 10 shots and only one of those is in focus, but that's kind of part of the fun, just going for it and just seeing what you've got when you get home and what's back up on your screen. And this was one of my first shots out in the water. I think this was around May last year when we were really getting into the sea dipping, really enjoying it. It was getting to the point where sunrise was super early, so on some occasions I'd miss the sunrise and just end up being out there after the sun had risen. But again, just looking out, just focusing on these ripples of the water, and they change from day to day. Just sometimes you've got these ribbons of water, sometimes it's silky smooth, like satin, and I just really enjoy those textures. And even dabbling in kind of more abstract shots of the water is something that really interests me at the moment and something that I'll probably look to develop more this year as well. And so this shot, again, quite close to home, this is a short bike ride. And I'm incredibly lucky because you can cycle there and you get to a point where the water comes around the other side of these beach huts, and on a still morning, you can get these beautiful reflections below. So I'll generally try and shoot as low as possible to the ground just to accentuate any reflections like this. And that view of sunrise as well. That amazing colour reflected in the sky above, which is obviously then reflected in that water below. It's an absolutely beautiful scene. And so this one was actually taken, we went out to Madeira a couple of years ago now. It was sunrise, but you'd never know because the sun didn't put in an appearance. But these moody landscapes, it kind of really added to the drama of those cliffs. And I'd shot this scene, taken a few images, and then actually my wife walked out to that viewpoint there just to have a look over, and I fired off some more shots. And for me, just having that human element against the drama of the cliffs gives a sense of scale and just gives a little balance to the image as well. So that was actually my favourite shot from that morning, more so than any that didn't have her in. Now this is down at a local beach as well. So this is setting up on the tripod, being super low to accentuate the size of these posts. And this is when the groins were being taken out and regenerated, and these were the new ones about to go in, but hadn't been finished yet. So just setting up the tripod, waiting for the waves to crash in and out, hitting that shutter with a wide angle lens, like I mentioned, just getting all that movement coming out of the bottom of the frame and the corners there. And it doesn't have to be those magical sunrises of all that colour coming up. Yeah, it's amazing, but also I really like these subdued blues as well. Just adds quite a darker feel to it. So something I'd love to do is shoot the surfers. Obviously, being out in the ocean, I'm meeting lots of other swimmers and meeting lots of surfers, and it's good fun capturing them. So this particular evening was the most amazing sunset. This is my local pier, so I'm down here quite a lot, whether it's just to sit on the beach and watch the sun go down, or if I'm out in the water too. And this guy, he's a great surfer, bit of a local celebrity, did a few moves for me. He's a really nice guy. I actually bought one of my images of him to put on their lounge wall, so that was a nice added bonus as well. And again, just those quick moments, quick shutter speeds out in the water. You know, it's moving constantly. You want to capture the surface for them to be super sharp. But also you can see in this image, you've got that spray of water coming up from his hand. And that for me was just that finishing touch. It just made it extra special. And you can see that lovely light on the back of his wetsuit as well, just where the sun's setting off to the right of the frame. Again, my local pier. This place has been an absolute godsend the last year. I've been down here all the time. And just to see the sun setting there in the distance and having this lovely golden light coming through, creating that silhouette figure just heading out of the water with their board on their head. And this is in the waterproof housing, just shooting really low to the water. I really enjoy getting out of focus water right at the front of the frame. And you can just see that amazing light coming through. Really special evening. And this is fairly local to home, but a place that's still a bit of a trek. So I've not been able to visit here in the last year, really. Apart from one opportunity that I had to shoot with Fuji actually at some point towards the end of the year in between lockdowns. But this shot is it's one of the holy grail shots of landscape photographers in the area. It's something where when the sun is furthest round, closest to winter solstice, you can really get that sunrise through the door of Durdle Door here. And for me, I don't enjoy plain blue skies really at all. So to have that drama coming through and that slight break on the horizon to allow the light through was absolutely perfect. It's a combination of those conditions. And as you can see, a slightly extended shutter speed, just getting some of that movement there in the wave and having that drawback of the wet sand as well, getting the reflections of the light and the shadows. Just kind of all those elements coming together complete an image. So this is probably one of my favourite shots of all time. And I remember being in Wales a few years ago. This was actually taken in 2018. And it was my birthday. And what did I want to do for my birthday morning? I was head out to Porthcawl and go and shoot the storm at this fantastic location, somewhere I'd visited as a child playing on the beach with my family. And it holds special meaning. So we went out there super early. I got a few shots of some crazy waves coming over. Got probably about 12, 15 shots in total that morning. Took an absolute soaking of a wave coming over the seawall. I just headed back to dry off, have a look at the images that I'd taken that morning, put on the fire, have a cup of tea. And it's all that story of that memory for me. It's not just an image of the technical aspects. There's so much more to it and all those special memories. And I think that is something that we can truly treasure photography for, is being able to capture these moments in time. And yeah, so that was a really, really special morning. So this is another place that's really close to home, just down at my local beach. There's so many interesting groins right along our coastline, so much to play with. And as a photographer, finding all these different ways to shoot something. So this, for example, was taken over a 5-second shutter speed. And the water was absolutely crazy, really crashing in. So even though you can't see those waves crashing in, you can see all that white water. And all of that white water is just where that movement is then captured in this 5-second exposure. And again, one of those really moody mornings. And sometimes that can really add to it. It doesn't have to be a bright sky. You've got these really dark tones. And it adds to the weather. The weather was absolutely crazy. The waves were coming in and it was raining. So in between shots, you're constantly wiping the sea spray off your lens and just trying to keep that clear. I'd rather try and do things right in camera and in that shot than trying to clone them all out in Photoshop, because that's complete pain if you ask me. As this was taken at Bude Sea Pool, we managed to get away actually in October last year. And it was an absolutely fantastic location to take these kind of shots and play with shutter speeds. So it was super high tide, loads of waves crashing in, and this was just a 2-second exposure. Just enough to show how that wave's crashing over the edge of the sea pool there. And just, again, creating so much white water. rainy morning. Once again, as you can see, I'm out in any conditions because these are kind of images that you'll capture something special because you don't really know what you're going to get sometimes. It just looks like a completely foggy backdrop, but I can assure you it was just the rain coming in. And again, a lovely spot in Cornwall. Anywhere we go, I'm constantly looking on the map. Where can I visit? What's within 20 minutes, half an hour that I can get to that I can add to my portfolio of images? And as well, it's not even just about the images, but it's about having that time out in nature, that time to enjoy watching the sunrise or watching the sunset. And I remember that taking this shot and I got absolutely soaked. And I think, I can't remember what shoe wear I had on at that time, but I'm sure I wasn't prepared with wellies on. But it completely came over me, got me shot, got me absolutely soaked. But I got this shot and, I was completely happy with it. And so this one was taken some time ago, actually, on a trip to Devon. And again, just planning locations, planning what you want to visit that's near to you. It's somewhere you haven't been before. And if you're shooting sunrise, quite often you're going to be arriving in the dark. So it's great to do your planning, know where you're going to park, how long that's going to take for you to actually get to the location you want to be. And I knew where I wanted to get this shot from, but I hadn't taken into account how bad the howling wind would be. And I had to actually climb this hillside or cliffside just to get to the top to get this image, because I wanted to get the sun coming from behind the lighthouse to kind of look like the light was on, like it was coming through the top of there. So I remember getting halfway up this cliff in the dark and the wind's howling so much that it's pinning me onto the cliff. So I had no choice but to carry on. But I remember thinking to myself, what am I doing? This is absolutely crazy. But it's all of this behind the image. It's all of those memories, all of these moments that go into capturing this image that I can look back on and I can share with others. And that morning was absolutely perfect, as in, the amount of cloud was just right. It kind of was really hazy and just held it back enough for that glow to come through the back of the lighthouse, which is exactly what I was looking for. And I touched on how great light can make the image. This was during a trip to Wales, and I remember watching the clouds pass by this little cottage on the cliffside in Rossilly Bay. And just as the clouds moved by, there would be these strips of light. So I waited for the light to move over the cottage when I took my opportunity to grab this shot. And without that light, it was just quite a flat image. There was nothing to really make it pop. So just adding that great light can really turn something into more of an exceptional image and really make it stand out. So that's all the images from me. So now we can move over to the Q&A. So if anyone has any questions for me, then please do pop them up on the feed and I will have a look and see if anything's coming up. So I can't see any questions at the moment, but if anyone has any questions about landscape photography, shooting at sunrise or sunset, any of the adventures that I've been on, or even about the connection of the ocean from me going out daily. If you have any questions about any of those things, then please do pop them up. So I can't see anything coming up there at the moment, so I don't know if we just don't have any questions at the moment. Okay, so I can't see any, but if anybody wanted to drop me any questions at all, then feel free to get in touch with me via my Facebook or my Instagram. So you can find me up on there under Emily and Dean Photography. Like I say, I do touch on weddings and some commercial work, which I do via a separate social media platform on Instagram under Emily and Dean Portraits, and I like to keep those things separate. And that's partly because for me, my main photography page is all about seascapes, landscapes, the ocean. And for me, it's more personal projects. And I think that's really important as a photographer, just to keep that passion alive through your personal projects. I love meeting people and I love shooting people, but I like to keep that separate because the ocean landscapes and seascapes and that kind of element has something so strong and powerful for me, as in it's quite meditative and relaxing and even quite spiritual. Walking out into the water at sunrise when there's no wind and the water's completely flat and calm, and you're just walking out into the water and all you can see is the horizon. Something really special about that. So please do pop along, have a look on my social medias. You can follow my work, see what I'm up to. I try and take the camera out most mornings when I'm in the sea, because for me, I feel like it's really important to document these moments. And I just like to, have these experiences for myself, and to be able to capture that on a camera is just that added bonus. And to have these images that I can look back on time, that I can put up around the home. And I think it's really important to print your images too. So something that I've done at home, I've got a feature wall in my kitchen with just lots and lots of frames. And I always put my photography up there, and it's taken a long, long time to get a set of images that I was so happy with, that we've now got a whole panel from the ocean. And it's been all of our experiences over the last year. So all of these images have something really, really special behind them, and stories and memories for me, which, like I say, personal projects. So all of these ocean images I'd like to develop on through the year. And if anyone does come along and have a look on my Instagram, you'll see that it's led on from just shooting at the shoreline and capturing these landscapes and seascapes, but actually looking for the details in the sea as well. Just, I think there's a lot of all these amazing abstract things to be seen out in the water, whether it's foam or bubbles or waves, um, all of those things are something really special, and something that I can just add to my collection. And it's interesting getting drawn into different elements and different areas of that kind of photography too. Well, we've got a little bit of time left. I'm just going to check if there's any questions that have come up yet. Let me see. Oh, so someone's asking, do I use any filters? So yes, I do. I do use filters to balance the sky and the land and create longer exposures as well. And I use case filters primarily, but also I've got a variable filter by Tide Optics, which is really nice for just extending that shutter speed and being able to have that full control over what's happening. So being at the coast, how do you make sure your lens is clean? So this is really important. I'm getting sea spray all the time, and I've constantly got so many cloths on me just to keep wiping. So, you might have to take a shot, have a good wipe off, take some more shots, and just keep going like that. And, it's inevitable you're going to get some sea spray on the lens. So it's really, really handy just having that waterproofing to the the weather sealing to the lenses. It's really important just to keep that camera safe and have kit that you can really rely on as well. I have the XC3. Weather sealing's very good. Yes, it definitely is. Could you let me know what waterproof housing you use? So I'm actually using a Sea Frogs housing. I've got it right here actually, so I can quickly show you. So this is what I take out in the water most mornings. So this will house my XT3 quite securely. It's quite heavy, but it's very buoyant on the water, so I can literally rest it on the shoreline, on the water's edge, and just be able to fire off those shots from there. So yeah, that's a Sea Frogs housing. I had it shipped over from Hong Kong. So as you can imagine, not very cheap, but yeah, great bit of kit to have in my bag. So what else are we being asked? What's your favourite kind of weather to shoot in? Um, it's so difficult to say because sometimes going out in the worst weather can be the most rewarding. And, it's not everyone's first thought to go out when it's raining or when there's a storm coming. But for me, I think that's really important to have those interesting conditions because you can have these few moments of great light that come through. If you go out in rain, you're going to get a rainbow, or you're going to get that break on the horizon at sunset where just for that split second, you're going to get the sun burst through just before the sun drops and it's gone for the evening. So you can get those brief moments of incredible light. And I think that's what's really important. And just to be able to, see these magical moments when you've been out in the rain, you come home and you just feel such that, rewarding feeling that actually everything has paid off. And, it doesn't always pay off, but that's part of the fun. What software do you use for post-processing? So I mostly use Lightroom because it's so intuitive and easy to use. I dabble in Photoshop just for the cloning out, really. Like I say, sea spray or raindrops. Um, so I'll touch on that. But also, I've started having a little play around with Capture One, which I find quite interesting. Obviously, you've got the Fujifilm version of that software. So that's really good. What first got you started into photography? So like I mentioned at the beginning, I took a little film camera out when I was very, very young, and I took lots of photos, and I've still got some of them now, and they're really blurry, but I just remember that love of photography, just that love of taking pictures. And it wasn't until, slightly later that I discovered the love of sunrise and being able to incorporate all those elements together. And that was what made it really exciting for me. Are you happy with your change from a DSLR to mirrorless? Is the quality as good? Yeah, mirrorless for me. It was lighter, easier to use, especially Fuji. It's really intuitive with all of the dials on the top of the camera. I'm not so technically minded, as I mentioned, so really having something that was easy to use um, just made it really good for me. And mirrorless, yeah. The kit bag's really easy and lightweight. So there's been so many benefits to moving to mirrorless, and I think it's been a great move. So actually, the session has run out of time, so I'm going to need to wrap things up. So sorry I couldn't get through all the questions, and sorry about the problem with the delay with them there. But like I say, if I haven't answered any of the questions, then please do drop it through on Facebook or Instagram, and you can get in touch via my website too. So huge thank you to you all for tuning in. I'm extremely grateful. So thank you again, and goodbye for now.